Good afternoon and welcome to Celtic State of Mind. My name is Laura Bradburn and I am joined as always by Brian Degnan on this Friday. How you doing, Brian?
I'm very good. Got that Friday feeling. Just early finish of work this afternoon and then a few beers in the garden, I think. So, all to play for the day.
Not too shabby. That's a nice
Not
way to
too
spend a
shabby.
Friday afternoon. Starting off here is not too bad either. Thank you everybody for joining us. It's great to see you. Don't forget, you can help us get up towards that 20,000 subscriber goal that we are rapidly approaching if you press the subscribe button and like the video. Don't forget, the word subscribe is misleading, doesn't cost you any money, just helps us out if you do that, and you get notifications whenever we go live. So make sure and do that, and you will help the channel get out to more people. Brian, obviously some of the topics have been discussed this week already, and I sometimes feel like in a Friday pre-season show we are kind of covering old ground, but nevertheless it's good to see we've got a couple of bits of business coming in. We've got Moritz Jentz, who's come in, the German centre-back, who I will be going to speak to later on this afternoon. So if anybody's got any questions they want me to ask them, suitable ones, I'll maybe consider taking them with me. And obviously Aaron Moy as well, the Australian midfielder, ex-Brighton and elsewhere, I think. I guess rather than asking you specifically about the two players, what's your opinion of the business or the way Ange is choosing to do business so far this pre-season? Are you quite happy with the pace of it and things like that? Because I know that we talk about sometimes the advantages of getting players in early, but we seem to have spread out our business a wee bit more. Do you think that's still an effective way to do it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you need to grade it on a curve, right? Because previous seasons we've got 3 loanees for the Premier League in the last day of the window. Do you know what I mean? So, I think, relatively speaking, this has been a highly successful window so far. The key phrase there being so far, because there's still a wee bit left to do. And I do think we'll do more business, which I suppose we'll cover later. But I think that if you look at it, if you take sort of emotion and some of the sort of unusual takes out of things, the key we finished really strong in the last seasons with a real strong foundation in place. We secured Jota, CCV, and we've covered left back that was a bit of a problem, centre back which was a bit of a problem. I mean, not necessarily a problem, but we needed more numbers, and we've added a midfielder, backup goalkeeper. So we're improving in the areas. So we're only going to get better, and the players are getting better. And I think that if you look at the performances in pre-season, again, there's been some mad takes, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but I think all in all, we've generally looked pretty good. We've looked as if we've kind of picked straight up from last year. So there's loads to be happy about, loads to be excited about. I think, though, what I've noticed over the past week, particularly, there's this narrative coming in that, you know, we're not strong enough for the Champions League, we're not going to compete at such a high level, there's this calibre of players not there. And what I would say to people is, you need to remember, last season, I didn't even expect us to win the league, given the rebuild. So I still think we're further ahead than we need to be. I don't expect us to be really, you know, getting quite far in European competition maybe until next year. I think there's still a lot of work to do. We need to understand that, and there's still infrastructure things going on behind the scenes. So I suppose it's balancing expectation versus sort of aspiration. And I think that, you know, I actually slightly disagree with that take as well, because I think we'll do all right in Europe this season. But my point is that there seems to be going for last season where everybody was like, oh, well, season's a bit of write off, no expectations, we don't even know who this guy is, to this season. We were going, right, he should be winning the Champions League. Why are we not signing players at £40 million? And it's like, what in a second? Let's just all relax for a second and sort of think it through and look at it a bit more logically.
Yeah, I think from my point of view, and I've fallen a bit victim to this as well. I mean, we'll talk about the signings and stuff like that in a little bit more detail going into it. But I remember having a discussion with somebody earlier on in the week talking about Aaron Moy and how, you know, did I think he was Champions League quality? Maybe not. Moritz Jentz, I have to say I don't know much about at all. But I guess the big thing for me is I just trust Ange so implicitly that regardless of who he's bringing in, regardless of what I think I know about the player or the level they're going to perform at, I trust Ange to get the best out of those players, and it was the same back in Martin O'Neill's day. Like, would you have said on the face of it that some of those players that he brought in were good enough to beat the likes of Juventus, AC Milan, Bayern Munich, all of those teams? Maybe not, but if you've got a manager players trust who they can trust the system of, and he continues to bring in players who meet his expectations when they're as high as Ange's, I guess it's kind of flipping on its head everything I think I know about signings coming into Celtic just because I trust the manager so much.
But that trust is earned, though, isn't it? That trust, and you just give that blindly and sort of trust. So there's been. Do you know what's strange, right? So I remember just before I joined Acsom, and it was the 10 in a row season, and everything went south, and Celtic fans were killing each other, and there was happy clappers, and there was Celtic Daz, and there was and it was all this madness, right? It was all these weird cliques, right? And everybody sat with each other. It was bizarre, right? And I hated it. But I'm starting to notice a similar thing coming in a wee bit. Because I mean, I've been particular in saying trust the process. You've got to look at what Ange has done, but I don't do that because I'm sort of blindly leading the party line and just being really positive all the time. The fact is, last season he proved it. It's so like any concerns we had, he alleviated very quickly and produced the goods. So that evidence means that there's no reason I shouldn't trust him and trust his process this season. When you talk about Big Jens coming in, the other thing that I think people need to be aware of is, was anybody thinking Carter Vickers was going to be as good as he was when we signed him? We'd signed a loanee from Tottenham who'd been at 7 clubs on loan, right? No reason to be overly excited when he came in. Jota, people tell you different now, but nobody really knew anything about him either. They knew he was a winger from Benfica that didn't really play much and was loaned out. And look at them. Look at how much the difference was. Look at how much people were celebrating when they came in this season because of what they'd done. Now, that was 2 guys that nobody really knew too much about. Say the same for Kyogo. Nobody knew who that was. I think the YouTube hits when Kyogo got announced must have been through the roof because everybody was starting to research him and find out who he was. Hatate, Maeda, Abada. None of these guys come in with any expectations, and look at what they've done. So when we look at Big Jens coming in, we don't have any expectations, but look at what they done last season. So there's evidence to suggest that Ange is going to get the best out of him. And see if he doesn't, we've not paid any money for him. We'll just send them back and not take up the option to buy. So I just think, like, I'll be negative if something warrants it. There was negative times last season where I thought we'd perform poorly. I did question a couple of Ange's decisions in terms of squad rotation. And I'll do the same this season if it's the case. Or if we get to the last day of the window and we sell Juranovic and O'Reilly and Kyogo to Southampton, I'll question the board. But at the moment, I don't need to because everything's going quite well. And I think we're in a good place. And I think patience is just required. And let's get competitive and see where we're at.
Yeah, I think what you say is exactly right. There is like people. I think sometimes people watching and listening to this podcast sometimes tell us that we don't criticise enough of the board, especially when things are going well, and maybe we don't talk about that side of things when things are going well. But I think that's part of being a football fan as well. Is if things are being delivered on the pitch and success is being delivered on the pitch, I personally feel like you've got less to question then. When the 10 in a row season fell apart, like you said, the reason you were looking elsewhere than just on the pitch was because you thought, well, the product on the pitch is a byproduct of the rest of the way the club's being running. So if it's poor, then we have to look at the rest of the club and see what's going on. Whereas if it's good, then we don't need to worry so much about some aspects of the rest of the club. Now, I would probably get slaughtered for saying that because that's me writing off some issues that I know Celtic still have. But, looking at, again, comparing the 10 in a row season to now, not just from a playing point of view, I quite like the fact that, we were begging for communication from the board before because we didn't feel like we were getting it. Now we don't feel like we even need it because all we need is a good team on the pitch, and that's what we're getting now. So I'm sure if things change, like you say, we'll be the first to say so. And even still, there will be decisions Ange makes throughout the season that we don't agree with, and we'll say so on this podcast. But you can't complain when there's not a lot to complain about, which I think is fair as well. So, Cameron Roberts.
The thing I think is important to always make the distinction of is you get Celtic. When you talk about Celtic, you talk about the football team and the players. Then you talk about, say, recruitment and the business side. Then you talk about board members. So it's all kind of separate, and you can have separate discussions about each, about the merits of each.
Mm.
And when everything's kind of working, you don't need to focus on parts that maybe aren't working as much, because why would you? Do you know what I mean? Like, and I think as well, like the way I'm seeing Celtic now, new CEO, new manager,
Mm.
and I think what that means is I'll judge them on what they're doing footballing wise over the course of the next couple of years. I see people saying we've not achieved much in Europe over the past 10 years, and they're right, but that's neither Ange nor Nicholson's fault at this stage.
Yeah.
So there's no point, in my opinion, there's no point dragging that up, because that's legacy issues. It's the same with the academy. I was quite critical of the academy last season, purely because I didn't think there was enough talent there to come through into the first team.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't blame Ange or Nicholson for that at this stage. If it's still like that in 10 years' time, then I'll be saying, hold on a second, why they don't get fixed? So you need to kind of take things in stages as well, and try and, it's hard to take the emotion out of things, isn't it? Like,
yeah.
And I've seen some crazy emotional takes about Aaron Moy, and I've seen people banging their chest and shouting and bawling and, you know, getting themselves all excited, but not having any actually idea what they're talking about. And it's a wee bit frustrating sometimes. And it doesn't mean that everybody has to agree that, you know, he's a great sign or not, but I think there's a kind of a hyperbole comes in. And I don't know, I think people just need to sometimes just take a second and look at it a bit clearly and look at where we're at. And I think broadly most things are going well, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, I think I agree. We've got some comments coming in. Cameron Robertson on YouTube says we're in a far better place at this stage of the season compared to the past so many years. I think the lack of Champions League qualifiers to prepare for is a big factor in that as well. And just in response to the comments I made about Martin O'Neill, Michael Ross says we spent a decently under O'Neill and got European final. That's the key, speculate to accumulate, which I think is fair.
Right, I disagree with that to an extent. Right, this is why I disagree to an extent. So I think that you need to speculate, yes, but what you can't. So say for instance, we spent £50 million this transfer window to guarantees last 16 or last 8 of the Champions League. Is that likely? Is that guaranteed? No. So say we spend it and we don't happen. We get a really bad draw, we end up in Europa League, get a bad draw there and drop out. Are we then going to spend another 50 million next season to try and do it? In the season after? What I would rather we did is spend 20 million on players and 20 million on a structure that's going to give us long-term sustainability and long-term success. So I get what the guy is saying, you need to speculate, I understand that. But that I think that's quite a short-term view, because we can speculate this season and go bananas and sign all the players, right? Sign 12 players at 6 million each. Push for the Champions League, and it might still not work. It might be a better chance, but it might not work. And we're not going to do that next season or the season after. We simply can't. So I know we've got more money to spend than we need at the moment, probably. I don't think we spent, I think it was something like we spent £9 million if you take away transfers out, transfers in based on this season and last. Something like that. But, and I get the cry for to add more money in, but it's not something that guarantees you success. Really. And I just think, yeah, you could do it maybe this season, but then what happens next season? What happens the season after? You've got to have a sort of long-term plan in place, and hopefully that's what they're doing. And it is something they failed on in the past few years. So I do get Michael's frustration there, but I've got to say, I would never expect Celtic to spend that amount of money. I think Ange said when he came to the club, he was under no illusions that we wouldn't spend. We're not the guy that club's going to spend, but you can't hold it. And that's the case.
Yeah, Strange Love the Doctor's in agreement. We speculated on Barkas and Ayeti. Look how that went. It's hit and miss with these things, but I tend to agree with what you're saying, especially in the current day. I mean, players of the calibre of some of the ones that Martin O'Neill signed back in the day would cost you even more money now and are probably a bigger financial risk, and nobody is a guarantee of success. I mean, we don't have to look too far across the way. Rangers fans were in some ways reasonably excited at the signing of Aaron Ramsey, and that couldn't really have gone worse. So, a big name is not necessarily a guarantee of any kind of success, and God knows some of the heroes we've had at Celtic Park are people who we never heard of before they walked in the door. Lubo Moravchik and Henrik Larsson spring to mind. So
Just look at Kyogo and Hatate.
Yeah, yep.
O'Reilly. I mean, my God, look at what they cost. Very, very, very little. So it's about buying right and using the money appropriately. And as I say, I think that you want continued success and you want to build on that, but you need to invest in infrastructure and academy and proper scouting and recruitment to get these bargains. That's where the money should go first, as opposed to saying, I mean, imagine we'd have spent $5 million on Shane Duffy in the 10-in-a-row season and look where they go. His own paper, I know what I'm going to say, is everybody was excited about him coming in. It seemed a good signing. So again, just because they're a big name or big money doesn't guarantee. That's my only point.
Just not to go off on too much of a tangent here, right?
Yeah.
But I want to. I'm not. I really don't deal in hindsight. Like, I'm not one of those people. But I always thought, and it proved to be right, I think. I always get worried when we get a big bruiser of a centre back like Shane Duffy in, whose main speciality, and something he is still to this day very good at, is lumping the ball away, heading it away, being part of teams that are under constant attack. I never saw anything before he came to Celtic or when he was in a Celtic shirt that suggested to me, oh, he's going to be good in a team that has possession most of the time, and it proved to be correct. Even in a league the level of Scotland, like, that he was going to have to play a style of football that was not something he was accustomed to coming from the clubs he was coming from. And I think, to bring that back to the present day, I think that's what we're seeing with Ange. We're seeing him bring in players from other teams who are maybe of a similar standing or play a similar brand of football, or at least have the ability to play the football. He knows that he wants possession-based football. He knows that that's what we're going to get in Scotland most of the time. And so he's not interested in players who play under siege at the clubs they're at most of the time. Is that an unfair assessment of Shane Duffy, or am I praising the signings Ange is making too much?
I think that's pretty fair. What I've said before is, being good enough isn't enough. It's not just like, I remember when we were talking about signing players and people were saying, just sign a good player, just sign a defender to clear the ball, just sign a striker to score a goal, just sign a keeper to save. But it's not about that. You can see that in how Ange is playing. It's about recruiting properly. And that's key. It's doing it right. It's the right player for the right club at the right time. And is Ange the right type of person? And he's got it really right so far. You have to say that. I think the question marks are guys like McCarthy. For me, Gucci's a wee bit of a question mark.
Okay.
I might call that a flag for that, but I think he's a wee bit of a question mark for me. Say McCarthy. And even guys like Urigidi Shaw, Ayeti, they're all kind of still hanging about. And I think in Julian, we don't even know what's happening with him, if he's going to be a player. So there's still work to be done getting these guys away first. But I think in general, you have to say 80-90% of recruitment's been very good under Ange.
Yeah. We'll get on to Ideguchi in a little bit, because I was interested. I think you mentioned that in the group chat, like during one of the games during the week, that Ideguchi's still leaving a bit of room to make an impression for you. So we'll get back to him. But the strapline we talk about there, and we mentioned him earlier, is how telling is Ange's response to EPL interest in Matt O'Reilly. So for anybody who didn't see it, I don't actually have a list of the clubs that are interested, but there is some rumoured interest in Matt O'Reilly from Premier League clubs, which, to be honest, I'm not surprised at. It was, for me, one of the best players we had in a Celtic shirt last season, and I'm sure will be this season. But for anybody who didn't see it, Ange was asked about the interest from the Premier League and said, I'm not seeing anything from Matt to suggest he's thinking about these things. The players know why big clubs might come for them. It's not because we've given them publicity, it's the work they do day in and day out. He's established himself at first team level at MK Dons and then with us. he's at the beginning of his career. We'll push him to be the best he possibly can be, as we do with all of them, because that's what's required here. So, I mean, I guess reading that, whether Matt O'Reilly, as Ange says, is thinking about a move or not is sometimes kind of irrelevant, because a club can say, we're accepting a bid for you, and there's not really much he can do about it. And he's also not saying there has been no interest or there has been no offers. But surely, and we've talked about it last week, surely, and I'm not being wishful in my thinking here, from a point of view of, same with Juranovic, there's a World Cup coming up in 6 months. He's got a settled first team role here. He's seen as a key player. Surely it's in Matt O'Reilly's best interest for this season at least to stay where he is.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things to take away for us, but we'll talk about Matt O'Reilly first. I think guys like him, Juranovic, any of the players in the squad, I think they've got Champions League. If they perform well in the Champions League, that is what gets them a move to a bigger club. At the moment, Leicester might come in for him, right? If he performs well in the Champions League, he could be a much bigger club than that comes in. Depending on how well he does. So if the players are thinking maybe moving on, I think even then they would still be thinking, well, let's stay here, let's do it in the Champions League, let's do it in the big stage first. Let's play consistently, get our international caps in, get starting for our national teams, and then that value goes up, and by extension your market sort of value goes up and your branding goes up, and you become more attractive to sort of wealthier clubs. I don't want to say bigger clubs, but certainly wealthier clubs. In terms of Ange and his reaction, I kind of just love the sort of confidence and the sort of ego. It's no arrogance, but it's just the case of, well, this is Celtic, this is what we're doing. If somebody comes in for him and he goes, I've got somebody else to do the job because we're Celtic and we're bigger than that. And he's kind of been consistent for that. Even last season, it's very much the case of, well, if players don't want to come, I'm not going to convince them. They want to be here, they'll be here. They want to play for me, they'll play for me. They don't want to do either, they won't be here. That's kind of it. He's very sort of, and it's a great attitude, it's a great life lesson to take away as well, but he can't affect what other people do, what other clubs do. He can only face into the challenges he gets. And if Matt O'Reilly and Juranovic went tomorrow, then his challenge would be replacing them. And I think he would face into that. You saw it last season when there was decisions didn't go away, or when we had a lot of injuries, and he praised the resilience of the squad and his own resilience and his coaching team's resilience, because they just got on with it. They never whined and complained, they made excuses and flapped about. They just got on with the job, because the priority isn't him or his team, the priority is Celtic Football Club and our success. And I kind of love that. So again, it's a weird Ange effect in it, because I'm actually, even when I hear speculation, I don't really panic as much, because as much as I'd be devastated to see Matt O'Reilly go, I would hate to see him go, but love to watch him leave, I think is the phrase. I don't really fear, because I think Ange will face into that and he'll have a backup plan and we'll be all right. And again, that's credit to him and the sort of confidence that we've saw. And it's not just because we want to believe that, it's wishful thinking. We've saw that type of belief in the system and the players and the culture. And I think that moving forward, we'll stay there.
Yeah, we'll come back to that in a wee second. Robert Little's just put a comment in. Surely you can't put every big name signing the same as Ramsey, so don't sign a big name then. No, I don't think that's what either of us were saying. I think we were just saying...
doesn't guarantee you.
You can't guarantee. And I think, to be fair, any club in Scotland signing Aaron Ramsey would have thought they were onto a surefire thing of a good signing, and it didn't work out the case. So not to say that not to try these things, but they just won't always work out. So, but yeah, I'm not going to be turning down any big name signing anytime soon. But
Laura, can I just pick up on something I saw in the comments there? So someone saying, they can't understand why people are happy with the board sense of sort of lack of ambition, I think was the phrase. I don't think that is what either of us are saying. If you look at it, if we just had the chance to get Jota and Carter Vickers for $6.5 million each, and we didn't take it because we didn't want to spend the money, I'd have been furious, but we did do it. I believe that whatever Ange's wanted, within reason, we've got. Now, just because we don't get a signing in doesn't mean it's because the board aren't paying the money. It might be the player don't want to come. And there is a finite resource as well. because they do have shareholders to be accountable to. So I don't think anyone wants it to be a lack of ambition. I don't think anyone sort of endorses that. I certainly don't. I want us to go. I've said loads of times I want us to be at a strong level in Europe. I just don't think throwing money at it is the solution, is my point. It's not about a lack of ambition, it's about how you achieve that ambition. So just me personally, it's not that I particularly do cartwheels when I see Ian Bankier and I get a picture of him and I love all the goals. I think the serious change needed. My point is, in terms of how we're doing things, I sort of trust the process that Ange is operating in, and that isn't going to change. So if we got some sheep to come in and we could spend 100 million a transfer window, fair enough. But that's not the position we're in. So it's about accepting the reality for me and working within that, as opposed to constantly moaning about something that's not going to change.
Yeah, and I think as well is like, I don't think either of us are saying, we're in full admiration of Ange, as both of us like to go on about. We know how ambitious he is and how much he targets the highest possible level. I'm sure his ambitions will outstrip Celtic Football Club's ambitions, or the board's ambitions, certainly at some point. But I don't know that we can accuse the board of not matching his ambitions just now. I think most of the things he's asked for, he's gotten. We're not dealing with a situation where they wouldn't give an extra 50,000 for John McGinn the way they didn't for Brendan Rodgers, or the purse strings aren't as tight as that. And so maybe I don't want to say it. Maybe they deserve a little bit of credit for the way they're treating Ange just now, but
we're only talking about since Ange's came in here.
Yeah.
That's the other thing. The context of the conversation isn't about Law's time. It's not about historically. It's just this year and last. So just for clarity. And again, just somebody's get themselves all excited in the comments and said, they think I want a photo with Ian Bankier. I literally said it today, but fair play to you. Although he might want a photo with me, who knows?
Oh, who knows? Who knows? Indeed, it's just interesting. And listen, I'm not sitting here. Brian will probably say the same. Any Acsom contributor say the same. A lot of people watching will say the same thing. Football fans, myself included, are fickle people. It only takes us to win a few games before I'm back on cloud nine, and it only takes us to lose a few games before I want the entire board sacked. So, if we're sitting 6th in October, and we're sitting
swinging a shark about, don't get me wrong, I'll be an absolute hypocrite if it comes that way. So, but listen, I suppose it's all banter, but it's good that everyone's so passionate about Celtic and loves it so much that we all want the same thing. So I never really particularly offend even people who don't agree, because that's all right. That's what you're supposed to do, because you're aiming for the one thing.
Yeah, no, I think we are, and I think that's something we can all definitely agree on. How we get to the success we want is maybe different amongst us, but the one thing is we all want success, and that's hopefully how things are going to go going forward. A big way of Ange meeting that success is with the recruitment of new players, and as I said, it's been discussed to some extent on previous podcasts this week. But Brian, I have to admit, the Aaron Moy signing, on the one hand, I was a little bit underwhelmed by it, maybe because it had been in the offing for a while. But when I thought about it, I do remember a lot of performances he's had over the years in the Premier League where he stood out for various reasons, and I think certainly domestically he's going to be a great addition to the team. Do you think he's got, as we talked about earlier, that ability under Ange to make that step up into Champions League football?
So this is. I think he was a fairly risk-averse signing. I think a decent signing. I think domestically he'll still be probably the best passer in the league outside of Celtic. I think he's got a great range of passing. He knows Ange. He knows how the team plays. He's going to fit in fairly easily. I just don't think. It depends. So some people, I think Kev Graham was saying he reckons he'll play as the sort of holding midfielder and might even play in the Champions League. I disagree. I think he'll be cover for if O'Reilly or Turnbull get injured. I don't think he's going to start. I think he's going to come on for the bench or maybe start some games domestically as rotation. I think he's the sort of player that's going to push us ahead in Europe. I think it's just a bit of squad depth because, and I think we're going to talk about him, but if O'Reilly and Turnbull or Hatate drop out that attack midfield role, I think there's a huge drop off to Gucci so far. Anyway, I might be wrong. Whereas I think Moy, he's got that similar qualities to Turnbull, particularly with his long range of passing, his ability to split the lines. And I think to get a player of that ability for free, who already knows the manager, I'm pretty comfortable with that. If we're facing Real Madrid in the Champions League and he's starting and he's playing in that hold midfield role and he's the marquee signing, then that's a different spec on it. I just don't see that happening. So I suppose my opinion will be sort of validated closer to when we start seeing competitive action. But for me, I'd imagine he'll start some domestic games or a wee cover coming off the bench. I don't think he's going to be the 50 game a season man. I don't think that's what he's signed for. I could be wrong, but that's not how I see it. I don't necessarily agree with, like I said before, whenever we sign somebody, it should be to be challenged or be better than the person we already got. And I think Siegrist could challenge Hart. I don't know if he will, but I think he could. He's a very good goalkeeper. I think Bernabei at left back could certainly overtake Taylor at some point. I think Big Jens, I think he's probably better than Welsh, but we don't know how he is compared to Starfield. So I think we've signed well and we've signed players that actually add to the squad so far. Moyes is a question mark, but again, I think if you look at the context around his signing, I don't think he's here to be starting Champions League games and winning his leagues. I think he's there to contribute as a squad player, if I'm honest.
Yeah, no, I think I would say I probably agree with that, but he might surprise us and stake his claim, which I hope he does, because it'll be all the better for the squad. And we'll come back to one of the points you made there in a second. I just wanted to bring this up from Peter McGee on YouTube. Says, I'm happy to give the board credit for appointing Ange and letting him go on with his chosen signings. However, I'm still not prepared to forgive them for all their past sins. I think that's fair, and I don't think that's in contradiction to anything that we were saying. So, but that's a fair point. But I think picking up on what you said about Moy is, and I agree to an I can see where your mind has kind of shifted, because I'm of the same mind of, like, you always want every player to come in to be fighting for the first 11 and taking a shirt off somebody else, which ideally they should be. But I think Moy, what he might do, as you alluded to, is bridge that gap between the drop-off between an O'Reilly and a Turnbull and Ideguchi. And so even if he's not going to be first choice for whatever reason, bridging that gap is only going to help us as the season goes on, because a second choice player becomes a first choice player at some point in the season because of the nature of the way things go. And I mean, look for example at the number of injuries we had to deal with last season. There's no such thing as a completely first choice 11 for us, I don't think, based on that alone. So it'll be interesting to see where he comes in. But listen, I've put it off long enough. I want to get into this Ideguchi thing. What's your hot take on Ideguchi? Like, because I have to say, I've not saw enough of him, I don't think, to say I have a particularly strong opinion of him one way or another. I don't think he's set the heather alight since he came. I think obviously his injury problems have been an issue, but I wouldn't say he's been terrible either. But I'm starting to hear people sort of saying, no, they don't think he's up to scratch. So where do you sit on that?
So I have to caveat this with saying, obviously, it's just pre-season, so maybe we need to see more time on him. But just so far, I don't really see what he offers. Like, I can't really tell you what his game is, what his strongest position is, what he brings to the team. He obviously is a decent player, Ange would bring him, but I don't really know what he offers. And if you've got Hatate, McGregor, O'Reilly, Turnbull, any of those four starting, any combination of that, I'm very comfortable. I think Moy will come into that and do a good job. But if Gucci starts starting games, I just don't know what I'm expecting from him.
Yeah.
And I just think that if he's cover for McGregor, he's maybe got that energy to run about the park, but I don't think he's got the range of passing. If he's cover for Tati, again, he's got that passing, but he's not got that intelligent pass. He's not, didn't look to be scoring goals. I don't know, I just can't quite figure him out. So for me, he's the one I'm a wee bit not worried about. That's probably harsh, but I don't get excited when he comes on. I just don't know what he offers yet. And I think he's one of the players I really hope proves me wrong.
Yeah.
Like, walking along the street and he comes up and sticks his fingers up my face and he says he scored 10 goals and I'm Ryan, I'd be delighted with that. I just kind of see what he's offering at this stage. And I think that's why that, we need, I think we definitely need another midfielder on that number 6 role, 100%.
Yeah.
I think it's a position we need to fill. I think we will. But I just don't see where he fits in the squad, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to be educated and I'd love to be proved wrong, but I can't quite figure him out. It doesn't excite me as a player.
Yeah, I think that's something that I think always happens when we're on the pod. Is it's quite funny because I would love nothing more for a player to prove me wrong when I criticise them in a Celtic shirt, because if I criticise them in a Celtic shirt, then the only way they can prove me wrong is by doing better, which is what I want. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But just as a snapshot of exactly where the Acsom viewers are with Ideguchi, we've got all across the spectrum in terms of opinions. So Gary Melrose says Gucci has been effective. Hopefully that's not damning with faint praise. Enru91 says Gucci is fine, whereas Monty says I would sell Ideguchi at the first opportunity. So we've got all corners of the globe there as far as opinions on Ideguchi is concerned. I think the thing that concerns me about him more is, and this is not specific to him, this is any player I'm talking about. I always get concerned when you can't really tell after watching a player exactly what position he's playing in or exactly what his strongest position is. And I think that's a problem with him. Is like, you can tell with other players that even if they're not playing in their strongest position, they've been well drilled by Ange and they know what their job is and they know what their role is. And regardless of whether Callum McGregor's a brilliant defensive midfielder, he's been told to play defensive mid today and he's doing it. Regardless of whether Maeda is a particularly natural number 9, on the occasions he's been asked to play number 9, that's the role he's playing and he sticks to it. It's not to say that players are always playing in their strongest position, but you know what they're doing. Ideguchi, I feel a little bit like, and I don't know if it's because he doesn't understand his role or if he's just taking a while to get used to things under Ange. I'm the same as you. I don't know exactly what it is that he brings to the squad or to the team that makes me go, oh, he's good for that job. And I think that's where there's a major issue as far as he's concerned. Does that concern you about him going into this season? Do you think he'll eventually find his feet, or do you think, has he had long enough to do that? Are we needing to look at other options?
No, I mean, I don't think I wouldn't go as far as to say I would sell him, but I'm not sure. I think he needs more time. Like, it's just my initial sort of feeling is I don't really get him. It doesn't excite me. I don't really see where he's going to fit. But again, I'll give him enough times if I've got any saying it. But as a viewer, I'll give him a bit of a chance before I judge. I say obviously Ange, likes him as a player, so I can't really argue with his judgment. It's just for me at the moment I kind of see it. But irrespective of how well he does, we definitely need, in my opinion, backup for McGregor in that number 6 role. Because I just don't think that, again, I like McCarthy in that position. I just don't like him in that position for Celtic. I think in a different team, he's a good player in a good position. I just don't think it's working for him. So he can't be the backup for McGregor. And Gucci, if that's his position, it doesn't inspire me loads of confidence that he's McGregor's backup either. So I do think we need at least a sort of holding midfielder in there. But again, I could be proved wrong and I'd be delighted to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Johnny Ryan says, Ange brought in Gucci, do you still trust him? See what he did there, Brian? He took what I said earlier and he flipped it on me. Honest to God, he's got me. You've got me, Johnny.
Well, I see, that's what I said. Like, if Ange's brought him in, then we have to think that he's obviously got a quality that maybe we've not seen yet. So that's why I said I wouldn't sell him. But just for me personally, I don't know what that is yet.
Yeah, in short, I do still trust Ange, even if I don't see everything from a player that he maybe sees from them. So, looking at the results we've had this week, we've obviously played a few games this week. Blackburn Rovers was one of them. We obviously played in Poland against Legia Warsaw for Artur Boric's last game. We've got Norwich tomorrow. I guess a major factor of the pre-season that has concerned me a little bit, and we talked about it last week, but it is a trend that's unfortunately ongoing. Just looking at the scoring record so far. So obviously we beat Werner Victoria 7-0 in the first game. We then drew 3 each with Rapid Vienna. We beat Bannock's 3-2. Drew 2 each with Blackburn Rovers, and we drew 2 each with Lega Warsaw. So that's us conceded at least 2 goals in 4 out of the 5 matches in the pre-season. Is that a concern to you? I saw people last week saying, we've not played our strongest backline and all that kind of thing, and it's pre-season and it needs to be experimental, and I get all that, but are you starting to feel as though we should have had a more settled backline there and we should be looking a bit more shored up at the back than we have been so far?
No, necessarily. No, I don't think I'm too concerned about it because it's pre-season. To be fair, I think there's people in pre-season have shown up really well. There's people that I don't think have. The one thing I would say is there looked to be a massive drop-off in quality between probably our sort of strongest players playing and their sort of cover. You noticed that particularly in the sort of Arthur Boric farewell game. The second half was pretty poor, especially considering how good the first half was. So that's a wee bit of a concern, but I can't also imagine with too many times throughout the season that second 11 will be the 11 we play. So that's where I'm not hugely concerned. Because again, I think that there's a bunch of factors around the conceding the goals, and look, the reality is we're going to concede goals the way we play anyway. It's that sort of high risk, high reward, and I don't think. I mean, in saying that, actually, last season we were pretty strong defensively. At the start of the season, we could look vulnerable at times. I think you're just going to take a bit of time to get into that rhythm. But again, once you start to see a consistent starting, 11, or I think Kev Graham said it really best. He says we don't have a starting 11, we've got a starting 16, and they just rotate. I think that's probably right. I think once that's playing every week, I'm not too concerned. I think we'll be okay. But again, we just have to be. It's that thing where you can't be talking about how good we're attacking and stuff like that. If we can see goals, we're rotting at the back. It's not always how it works, because sometimes we can see it at the back because the midfield's getting it away, or the strikers are taking their chances, and that's putting pressure in the back. So it's not always just about the defence, it's about the team in general. And that's the same for the guys going forward. They've got that freedom to go forward because the backline's doing a good job. So there's various things to take into account. But I'm not particularly worried so far. I don't think pre-seasons. You obviously have a bit of judgment, right? Because you sort of, I don't know about him, I don't know about Aim. I don't see them having a great season. There's other guys you think of. I mean, I think Hatate, for instance, has shown up and he's been excellent. He's really starting to look like the player we wanted him to be, and the player I thought he was going to be consistently. So you can take positives and negatives for pre-season, but it is pre-season. That's the context, and I don't think we can get too bogged down about it, if I'm honest.
Yeah, any proof that we need that pre-season doesn't factor into the real season is you only need to go back as far as Albin Ayeti last season was, reasonably. He was playing reasonably well. Started last season reasonably well as well, and we all know where that went. So, as always, I need to calm down when it comes to Celtic and just see how it goes. But
never calm down, Laura. Never calm down.
I was going to say I've never done it for 30 odd years. I'm not going to start now. So, but an interesting point here brought up from Pat O on YouTube, and I feel like you alluded to it earlier. So I'm going to pop the question on the screen for you. I can see Siegrist being number 1. No pun intended. I don't know where the pun is, but anyway. What do you think of that? Is Joe Hart potentially going to be second choice this season? Has Siegrist been brought in to be the number 1, do you think, without anybody going out and out and saying that? What do you think the chances are of him taking the sticks, given the fact that Joe Hart was such a vital, major part of our success last season as well?
I don't think he's been brought in to replace him. I think he's been brought in to compete with him. I think that, Hart came in last season, he had a bit to prove, and he done that. I think he still made a couple of mistakes, as all goalkeepers will do at some point, but I think he was steady, and I think he really sort of helped our defence as well. But if he'd have got injured last season, it would have been a massive drop-off, as we've spoken about. I think now if Siegrist comes in, I'd be pretty comfortable. And he may be a long-term replacement, but for the moment, I think Hart's number one. And unless he's a drastic drop in form, I don't see him being changed too often. Ange, he sort of said it, he's not hugely fond of changing the sort of goalkeeper and his two centre-backs. It's kind of the only positions he won't rotate too often. The flip side of that is if Siegrist does get a chance and he does well, I think he'll keep it until such times as he makes a mistake and Hart comes back in. Hart starts the season as number one, and rightly so, I think. And I think having competition there, Hart seems to have a guy that will thrive on that, which is the quality you want in all your team. So, I think he'd be competition. I don't think he's the replacement.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with that. Like, I think obviously Siegrist is a significant part younger than Joe Hart, and so his future at Celtic is maybe more assured in the long term. But I think Joe Hart's done nothing to suggest he should lose his place so far that I've seen, and I think given, we all know the problems we had between the six in the previous years, and given how much he shored things up for his last season, he's been a vital part of the success we've had, and I would certainly be starting against Aberdeen with him on the 31st of July. Speaking of which, we've got the game against Norwich tomorrow, and then Sunday the 31st of July is the league opener against Aberdeen at Celtic Park. How much, if any, business do you think we're going to do between now and then? Do you think things are pretty sewn up as far as that side of things is concerned? Is he just going to work with what he's got now, or do you think we're looking to strengthen in any other areas of the squad before the transfer window slams shut, as they like to say?
I think we'll get a defensive midfielder in. I still think that's going to be key. I hope we do anyway. That's a position that is a wee bit of a concern to me, especially if McGregor gets injured. I think there's too much of a drop off if he gets injured for me. So we need someone to come in that can sort of do what he does, or even if he doesn't do exactly what Callum McGregor does, he's effective in a different way. Beaton was someone that's much to cry, but I think he had a pretty good season last season. I think most people would agree. And times he came in for McGregor, I think he done reasonably well. But I don't think Gucci or McCarthy are maybe not capable. Maybe that's harsh, especially with Gucci because he's not seen enough of him. But I just think there's too much of a drop. So that's a position that I do think. Everywhere else, I would probably be okay if I never signed anybody else. I think it will depend on who goes. So I still think Julian will go. I think Ayeti will go. Probably he'll go on loan somewhere. And I think guys like Shaw, Urigide, I think there's some of those kind of French players will still go as well. Mikey Jones will be an interesting one. I think a lot of people have been suggesting he should go, but it seems like Ange quite likes him.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with him this season. And it's good that guys like Rocco Vata and Boston Law have been in about the first team. I think that sort of serves them in good stead moving forward. You could see them featuring a wee bit more. And, I think I would rather, if we're going to be looking at the sort of squad depth, I'd rather supplement that with guys for the youth academy than just sign a player to substitute that, unless, of course, they don't have the quality required, such as getting like an Aaron Moy in, because we don't have anyone like him that can come in. I think if we get a certain defensive midfielder, I'll be pretty comfortable. I'll be a wee bit disappointed if we don't, because I do think that's an area we need. But again, there's plenty of time. I think is it the end of August the transfer window shuts?
Yeah, I think it's around about that time, yeah. So we do have a little bit of time when the season starts.
To go. And again, it may depend on players leaving, but I think we still see a bit of movement either way.
Yeah, and I don't doubt Ange will use the first few games of the season. I mean, before the end of August, we've got Aberdeen, Ross County, Kilmarnock, Hearts, and Dundee United. So, there's a good few games there against some decent opposition from a domestic standpoint where he can assess what he needs if there's anything kind of missing and hopefully bring something in. But knowing Ange, I don't know that that's necessarily the way he works. I'm sure he'll have people in his mind that he's already got targeted or deals nearly done. I quite enjoyed actually that he was so open last week and that he obviously is a man of his word as well. That it was very strange because he said last week during a press conference oh, we're working on 2 signings that we hopefully get done within the next 7 days, and then we ended up with 2 signings within the next 7 days, and I took a lot from that, to be honest, that, don't get me wrong, if the 2 signings hadn't come in, it might not have been his fault that they never came in, but, you feel like when Ange chooses deliberately to say something like that, it's because he's pretty sure it's going to happen, and he doesn't mind people knowing it.
Yeah, it's quite refreshing actually, isn't it? Because usually the managers hit you with I'm not going to talk about other teams' players, or I know the discuss was working in the background and they kind of brush it off, but he's been fairly clear about what he says is what happens, and I like that. And I think that bodes well just in general with Ange. I think one of the things we've all spoken about is how he conducts himself with the press and the media and the things he does, and he tends to just kind of say it as it is. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a good quality. It's a good quality in a human anyway, but it's certainly refreshing in a manager to be fairly transparent. I think obviously things they can't say, I'm trying to get rid of a jetty, and I can't. Do you know what I mean? I can't stand so I want him out. There is a limit, obviously, but I think he's been pretty clear, because obviously he understands the anxiety that Celtic fans are going through in a transfer window. It's even if no matter how we got on last season, we'd still be doing the same thing. We'd still be sort of speculating, still getting, I want this position filled, we need this, we need that, and that's just kind of what happened. So he also understands that, and he's trying to sort of allay those fears wherever possible.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he is doing, and it's just strange to have a straight talking, honest, transparent person at the club, given what we had to deal with for so many years beforehand with back and forths and this kind of thing. So it's interesting. Lanky67 says on YouTube, I think Ange will get 2 more players in, a CDM and a forward that can play the front 3. Like the shirt, by the way, Lanky, that's a classic one. So he brings up a good point though there. You mentioned about the CDM, which I think everybody knows we're crying out for. But I am concerned that with Ayeti still on the books specifically, that we probably do need another number 9. We've got Kyogo and Yakimakis who can both play through the middle, but I can't think beyond them anybody else in the squad that I would be happy with playing through the middle up front. And as we know with both of them, they do get battered about quite a bit. They can get injured, that kind of thing. Do you think another forward player is something that's worth spending our money on for the season?
I think possibly another forward, but I don't know necessarily another striker. I think probably a left winger is what we would need. Because at the moment you've got Maeda, Jota can play both, but you make the assumption it's Jota, Maeda, Forrest Abada, Rocco Vattel maybe coming on now and again, and then Mikey Johnson. So I think probably need another left winger, again, given the fact Jota can play both sides. And the reason I say that instead of a striker is because I think Maeda can come in. So if Kyogo gets injured, you've got Yakimakis. If he gets injured as well, I think Maeda can come in. And I don't think he's as clinical, obviously, as those two. But I do think he can do a job there, especially if we are under a bit of pressure and we're looking to counter-attack. He's sort of tailor-built for that. Tailor-made for that, rather. Absolute worst case, he gets injured. I think Abada could probably play as a striker. But again, if those guys are currently play as a striker, I think you do need another high-quality winger. I wouldn't be hugely dissatisfied if we don't, because again, I think I'd like to see what Vata can do.
Yeah.
However, if I was to send another forward, it'd be probably a left winger, not a striker. Because you've also got the boy Kenny as well.
Yeah.
It might be good to see what he can do even domestically. Again, if we're trying to get to this position where we're looking to bring players through in this pathway we keep talking about, maybe having him there, because if he's got enough team running about him that's very strong, he kind of just has to stand there and try and put it in the net. And if he proves that, you might not need to go out and spend any money on a striker. So no, a winger for me, and as Lanky says, a CDM.
Yeah, no, I'll never forget when we announced that we'd signed Kenny. I misread it and my heart skipped a beat because I thought we'd signed your man from Everton that had been playing right back for us. Yeah, and I was like,
Kenny CSC, what a player.
Like, who the hell has sanctioned that one? But thankfully it wasn't the same guy, so we're fine. But it was, I do remember kind of feeling as if I'd woke up in some kind of parallel universe going, what the hell happened? But anyway, no, just me not reading what I what I was reading properly. No, it's just an interesting one coming to the end of the pre-season that the excitement for me has died down a little bit in terms of, because we're now into the pre-season games and we're seeing Celtic play again, I'm back into the swing of watching Celtic play and things. But I guess the thing that I've enjoyed this pre-season more than any other is just the kind of calmness of it all. The idea that things are being done, things are being worked on. You're not having to, I felt like in years gone by, you kind of been poking and prodding at the club via social media or whatever way you want to put it to get information out of them because you were worried they weren't doing anything in the background. I don't feel like they've only really come out to say things to us when they've had a signing to announce, but we knew that things were going on in the background. I think that's making a huge difference to how I'm feeling going into the season. Is that the same for you, do you think?
Yeah, 100%. I think, I'd said, I think it was last week, that this is the most excited and confident I've been in sort of pre-season in a transfer window for Celtic for a long, long time. But again, that's just because of Ange and his team and what they've done last year. So that they sort of exceeded my expectations last year. I expected them this year. So that is it's not as much that I trust sort of Celtic and the sort of behind the scenes stuff so much all of a sudden that I've got complete faith. It's that I trust Ange to work well within the sort of limits that will be set. I said before that if you look at, we had this idea historically that we'd sign these young players from unknown leagues or no high profile and try and develop them, sell them on. I suspect that's still probably the case. It's just that Ange is doing it better than most other people have. Because he's sending these guys that fit that remit, that actually fit his squad and his style of play.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're still working within that mould. Although I think we've been a bit more efficient about it in terms of getting players done quite quickly and getting guys in that fit the system, I think we're still probably working in that environment. So there is a nervousness around that. And I think it goes back to the conversation at the start about, the money spent or not spent and how it's spent. I think Ange is doing that particularly well and he's proved that. So there's actual tangible evidence that it's working. So it's not just the fact that I'm quite excitable and quite giddy as a wee human. It's the fact that actually it's been proven so far. If last year had been an absolute disaster and the signings had all been poor, then I'd be petrified this season. But even within that, there's still a horrible anxiety. Like I say, I'm Mr. Positivity at times, but I was still shouting the ball into TV when, Bain conceded the second goal against Slega. Do you know what I mean? So you're still tuning in, you're going, what are you doing? You're rotten, and you're shouting the ball and calling the names, and then you love them all after it if we win. It's just, the football fans are all the same, we're always going to be. But if you look at it, if you could take a step back, it's actually the reason I don't do post matches anymore. Because I think I done about 2 last year, and I couldn't cope. I was bonkers. I was either too excited or like too raging. There was no in between. It was the bipolar express. It was terrible. So I think, So I'm all right. I can be fairly measured just now. During games, it's different, and I think that's always going to be the case. And listen, when you love something and you're passionate about it, it's always going to be the case. So that's the job when you're a fan, isn't it?
Yeah, I think if anybody wants to know what I'm like after a match, one of the highest viewed videos on this channel is post a defeat to St Mirren at Celtic Park during the Neil Lennon days, for which I was in the throes of lockdown in the winter, watching Celtic play one of the worst games of football I've ever seen, and I reacted as one might expect me to react. It was not pretty for anybody involved, but that's not taught me any better. I'm still doing the post-match or the match reactions and stuff going forward, for better or for worse. So tune in if you want to see that. I have no shame. No, I think we're going to cut things there. I have places to be, as I said before. I'm going to be at the unveiling press conference for Maurice Jens, representing Acsom, obviously. Hopefully get to ask him a question or two. Primarily, whether him and Matt O'Reilly are football friends or not.
Football friends.
Yeah.
And listen, it's for anyone that doesn't know, Laura does a brilliant job when she goes to these press conferences. She's very, very good, and she puts a lot of journalists to shame, or so-called journalists to shame. So look out for the content that we dropping, because it's very, very good, Laura. And I think it's not acknowledged enough publicly. So there you go.
Oh wow, thank you very much. I don't know. I just ask what I think are interesting questions, and hopefully the answers that are given are interesting as well, because ultimately that's what we're there for. And to hopefully try and get some little gems out of the new Celtic players that are coming in the door, and some of the old ones as well. I'm itching to ask him a question about Peter Grant, but I can't think of one to ask him, because he did mention he was coached by him at Fulham, and I thought that is a wee gem, by the way.
Ask him what Rebel songs he taught him, because he's definitely taught him something. Ask him what his favourite Rebel song is, and what Peter Grant, what things Peter Grant told him to say.
Aye. No,
you better know in case you get him cancelled, because
I was going to say, I don't know, I would accidentally land him in hot water, I think, if I did that.
So actually, I'm sure Peter was fairly vocal.
I was going to say Peter Grant might have taught him some stuff that isn't for public consumption, so we'll leave it there. Thanks very much for joining me, Brian. Thanks everybody in the comments for joining. It's been fantastic. If you don't know, we're doing match coverage, a crossover between ourselves and Jared and the guys over at Celts Down Under. So we will be involved in that in a kind of cross collaboration that will be live on both channels, I believe. Are you involved in that, Brian?
I'm not. No.
No.
I can't make it. As I say, I'm usually banning myself for pre and post matches anyway, even friendlies. But no seriousness, it would be good. Jared's a great guy. If anybody's not watched his podcast, watch it. He's a top bloke, and really good podcast as well. So it's nice when you've got a friendship with podcasts. It's not always the case. So Jared's a top man. So look forward to it.
No, we're all here to talk about Celtic, which is the most important thing, and we quite enjoy doing that, as I'm sure you can tell. So if you can join us for that coverage tomorrow, either on Jared's channel or on our channel, whichever you prefer, and we will see you there. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you again very soon.